Are there any security issues in modern times when it comes to computing?
I mean, security is probably the number one challenge we face today. We're dealing with systems. You think about a computer, think about the internet. All this was built up in an era when people didn't have an understanding of some of the risks, some of the ways people can take, what seem like good ideas and twist them into something that's a little less good or less ideal.
People were naive back in the beginning days of computing.
A little naive, yeah. I'd say maybe not naive, but they were blissfully unaware of just how dark people really can be. And so these days, we're really spending our time trying to ensure that those people who have bad intent, be them, the criminal types or, hackers of opportunity, through to, nation state actors. Although I'll tell you what, if your primary target is a nation state actor, or trying to defend against nation state actors.
About Hollywood actor?
Well, it's what it feels like it should be, right? I think in a lot of movies.
Go to acting school first before you become a hacker.
The funny part is that, you look at a movie like Hackers or Swordfish or something like that, and they portray this like hackers as these cool looking hackers. Yeah, exactly. Cool looking people. But in the end, most of the time it's much more mundane, and these people are, very well funded as well. So it's a tough proposition to defend against those types of threat actors. But definitely, there's a broader space that, the crimes of opportunity and all that you really want to deal with. But really it's about, what's keeping important to the company inside the company and ensuring that, client data or whatever it may be is not something that's going to be at risk.
Let's talk, let's segue to facial recognition. With the advent of people wearing masks nowadays, it's kind of like it became passé. There was right before, Corona hit, it was actually like there was a lot of conflict and controversy about privacy and things of that nature when it comes to, facial recognition. Where is facial recognition today, in 2021, like almost mid 2021?
So it's been really interesting following over the last year or so. Obviously with masks, facial recognition becomes a lot more difficult, but we'll hopefully hit a post-mask era. But the challenge with facial recognition has been that it's the false positives. It's you don't want to end up arresting someone who really isn't the person you're searching for. Mm-hmm. There's a whole pile of problems with the implementation of facial recognition that actually pose risks to personal liberties and so forth. So what's been really interesting is over the last year, we've seen municipalities and governments and all that say, we're not allowing our police to use any sort of facial recognition technology, be it for civil justice reasons or just simply because it is a little creepy to have a camera that can identify you.
Do you think there's a possibility that there could be like two-factor authentication applied to this particular field, if you will, so that, let's say, if there is someone recognized, but there should be some secondary way of confirming that identity? And only then they have a 100% go or a green light on, okay, this guy is, or this woman or this child or whatever, is a perpetrator or anything. The other way around.
There's a lot of good arguments for something like that. I think it's a difficult line to walk, though. Like, at what point are you ending up with dragnet surveillance, where everyone is being constantly monitored, similar to what you have in China today?
That's right.
Or is it something where, yes, like having I have to show you, I have to show with the camera data that this is, Phil, and then I also have to go and have a police officer confirm it. One could argue that that is a saner way to do it. In the end, a lot of cases of false identity happen even when you apply protocols like that. So it's a tough technology to really say, should this be something that should be used today in its current incarnation? It's not ready yet, is the way I would say. But even then, I think there's a lot of questions of personal liberty and privacy that have to be addressed as a society before we're ready to adopt technologies like that, specifically for the mass surveillance type of case.
Do you think it's the humanity that's behind the technology, or the technology that's behind the humanity trying to save its privacy, if you will?
Yeah, privacy is a funny thing. I think
because if I'm going to interrupt you for a second. If facial recognition works beautifully, 100%, then it actually is a good thing in a way, right? I mean, it's kind of Minority Report-ish.
Yeah, that's kind of. I always try to shy away from it, but it's like Minority Report. It's exactly what I would say it is, and I think we end up with this question of, okay, we could have total surveillance. What does a total surveillance state buy you? And it's shades of trade-offs, right? And I don't think something like that would fly in America, personally. Mm-hmm. But, there's probably legitimate applications of facial recognition technology, for example, for access controls to buildings, like making sure, should these people be here?
Right.
I think those use cases we're going to see become more prevalent. I think doing that on a mass civil scale is going to be very challenging, and probably I'm hoping something I won't see in my lifetime. But I mean, like I've said, we're seeing it in China, and people have become acclimatized to it. Not for me personally.
So an example of, like you said, like access control to, let's say, a building, right?
Yeah.
Like a lobby of the building, right?
Mm-hmm.
If the person has no business to be there, and he's there or she's there, and the facial recognition can actually alert the security guard. So, back in the days, or I don't know if it's still the case, the security room would have 20 computer screens.
Yeah.
And then go figure out which camera has, the malicious intent, kind of happening in that particular, screen. So here the facial recognition would help the private entities to kind of point out, okay, this could be a potential threat or whatever.
Yeah, and that's, by the way, that is going on at a large scale today. Not everyone's doing this. Airports are actually one example of an area where this is done on a massive scale, though, where from the moment you walk in the doors of an airport to the moment you board a plane, you're tracked by cameras. They're able to track, in some cases, who you are, right. Where you're traveling.
That's to protect against terrorism.
Exactly, yeah. And so for a lot of buildings, the way I would actually put it is, I don't want to see that in the lobby, in a public lobby for an office building, for example. I think that's a little bit of a slippery slope. But once you get into the controlled areas of the building, past your lobby badge access controls or whatever, it's fair game.
Yeah,
I think that at that point, usually employees agree to be monitored in that way. So it makes sense at that point as a control. So I think there's a lot of value for something like that. But it's really trying to stay away again from that dragnet surveillance approach, where it's like, okay, everyone's potentially a criminal because they've been recorded committing a crime.
Until they're,
and yeah, exactly. You're already guilty. It's like a Judge Dredd type situation, right? But until, we want to stay away from that situation, I think. But there are definitely valid applications of it. And like I say, I mean, airports are a prime example of where this is going on today. It's not massively talked about, obviously.
Yeah. All right. Now, let's talk about online voting, right? In terms of 2021, right? 21st century.
Yeah.
It's been 21 years since the 21st century kicked in.
Hard to believe, man.
And, to this day, the online voting through devices, everyone has the, the device on, on their person. And why not? Why is it not happening today when everyone could be voting, let's say for, a senator or, House of Representatives or, any kind of thing, let's vote on, do we need to build this bridge or not?
Yep.
Boom. Everyone sent an SMS or whatever.
Vote yes, vote no.
Yeah, vote yes, no.
Dial 24601 to vote yes.
Do we need to repave this street?
Yep.
Here, boom.
So
I'm going to need a little bit of budget from, for that and blah, blah, blah.
So it's an interesting question, and this comes up a lot, especially on election times. And it really comes down to the phone, for example, mobile voting or even computer-based voting on the web would pose a massive convenience for voters. There's no question of that.
Yeah.
If it's done right, you deal with all the usability of it, it would be very easy for people to get access for voting. The problem is that anything we do to make it easier for the voter to actually take that voting action means it will also make it easier for someone directly attacking the electoral process to take advantage of that. Mm-hmm. So it becomes kind of a matter of we're reducing a barrier to actually access voting, in which case it'd make it easier for individuals who are homebound or whatever to access it. But again, it'd also make it easier for someone who maliciously intercepts those SMSs or happens to be able to pretend to be an individual by stealing some factor of identity, whatever it may be. So that's one big problem there. The other problem is that one of the benefits of paper ballots, and I can't stress this enough, is that how you collect and how you index and then how you count paper ballots is very easy to explain. Any layperson can understand how these processes work. And that's actually an important fact, because in the end, if I want to have a good assurance of integrity of the election, which is one of the problems that came up in 2020 during the election, there was a partisan concern that, it was vote stuffing or someone was trying to prevent voters from accessing it. It's trying to stay very neutral on those matters. But the reality is if you had a system of online voting, you wouldn't be able to explain all the steps that happened from the moment someone received the notification to vote to the actual recording of the vote. So it's actually
what about biometrics? Like, for example, I can touch my phone, and there's a history, like, if you will, a database of how many times I touched that a fingerprint sensor. So as well as, let's say, two-factor. Let's put it two-factor. How long you've had the cell phone number, and then it makes that circle with the text being sent to you for verification. You hit that URL in that text, and then plus the biometric. Let's put the third factor.
I'm gonna be the deviant here now, right? This is what people pay me to do, believe it or not. But if you gave me a system like that, I would say, okay, so it's your phone number, right? Well, I'm going to get a SIM card and I'm going to phone up your cell phone provider and say, hey, give me Renat's phone number. Yeah. And 9 times out of 10, either they'll do it based on information I can Google about you, or I can go pay someone who's inside of the company and say, hey, transfer Renat's phone number to my SIM card. And they'll do that.
Really? That easy?
Yes, it's that easy. So
last time I switched from one provider to the next,
it was like pulling teeth, right? Yeah. No. If you know the right wheels to grease in this process.
Are you serious?
Yes, it is that easy. This is actually one of the biggest problems that faces using phones as an identity mechanism is the phone itself, the number, it's actually transient. The phone itself has a whole pile of components like biometrics and all that, but those are only local to the phone.
Right.
So if an attacker says, hey, I'm going to take Renat's number and put it on my phone, I can't tell the difference between the attacker authenticating with their fingerprint on their phone that they put the SIM card in, and you putting your fingerprint on your phone with the actual legitimate original SIM card.
So the attacker could have a clone copy of my SIM card in his phone and basically pretending that he's me.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's not even a clone. It's just a matter of tricking the phone company to do what they need them to do. And even worse, there's like a level where you can get access to like the deep guts of how these phone systems work. It's called SS7, the network that the carriers use to communicate. If you have access to that, you can completely take over someone's phone number. You can intercept their text messages. There's all kinds of things that happen.
Why is it not secure in 21st century, 2021?
Is this
the biggest backdoor, if you will? Taking over someone's identity, or?
It's a big challenge, and it's actually becoming more and more relevant.
When did this kind of come to light? How recent is this?
It's funny because this has been a known problem for decades. Honestly, if you had access to, you go back if you really want to go back. The Captain Crunch, John Draper, controversial person on his own. But the whistle that he got in that Captain Crunch box that allowed him to trick AT&T switches or Ma Bell switches at the time to allow him to do long distance calls.
That's right.
We've been doing that in different measures. Yeah, exactly. And it's different measures. So they went from in-band signaling, which is what that's called, where you can whistle and those tones will trick the switch into doing things, to this SS7 network, which is out-of-band signaling. So
there's for something SS7.
I think it's Signaling System 7. So I'd have to be checked on that one. But
almost like 007.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. But it's wild, and this is one of the biggest gaps in telecom infrastructure today. And this is protected. People really go to great lengths to protect it. But if you have someone inside of a phone company who has access to that infrastructure, it's game over. That's the insider threat through and through.
That's insane. What's your take on using VPNs? In capitalistic countries or first world countries, using VPN. Do you really need to be using it? When I visited China once, and everyone uses VPN,
right?
Because YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, you name it, everything is banned.
Yes.
But people still use it.
Yep.
It's just like a bureaucracy checkpoint. Okay, yeah, we have a firewall, or China wall, or what is it?
Yep. The Great Firewall of China. Yeah.
But everyone uses VPN.
Yep.
Like, why would you use VPN in the US? I mean, unless you have like malicious intent, like, what's your take on it?
It's actually it's an interesting question in that regards, because maybe there's a malicious portion and you want to hide your tracks. But the thing I would then ask is, well, who are you using to hide your tracks? Like, okay, if I'm committing a crime using my home internet connection, whoever it is, AT&T might actually then be able to help someone track me down and bring me to prosecution.
Because they see everything down to the beat, right?
Well, they see everything I do, and hey, if a company says, hey, I have your IP address, they go to AT&T because they figure out it's an AT&T IP address, and then AT&T says, oh, that belongs to Phil Vachon, that account. Here's his information.
But what if Phil used VPN?
So what if Phil used VPN? Well, instead of going to AT&T, they'll go to your VPN provider. So in the end, you're not really covering your tracks. And even worse, a lot of these VPN providers aren't very transparent about what they do with your traffic. It's going to get routed somewhere. So it's going to get routed, to a different country, to a different city. In most cases,
they're like on some islands or something.
Yeah, or France actually is a really popular destination as well.
Yeah.
They have very good data protection laws. But you don't actually know what that provider is really doing with your data in the end. So they could be logging everything you're doing, for all you know. Mm-hmm. Now, this isn't to make everyone paranoid, because there's one big benefit to VPNs, which is getting around policy, right? And that can be policy like, I want to torrent something. And, if you want to torrent Linux ISOs, of course, you're not pirating anything,
right?
Of course. If you want to do that, then it's a good way to get around the fact that your ISP blocks BitTorrent. But if you're getting to the point where you want to, I want to watch a sporting event that is blacked out in my region.
Right.
I want to watch the hockey game because I'm a hockey fan, and I can't watch the New York Rangers because I'm in New York.
Right.
Well, I can now use a VPN to get to, San Francisco, and the game's not blacked out there.
That's right.
So that's where you kind of there's a value to it. But I always say to people, be very cautious about who you give your data to. And a VPN provider is definitely an example of someone I'd be cautious of.
What security technology is going to win in the end? Meaning, what is going to be the go-to to everything as far as security, authentication and logging in and, recognition or any...
So I'm not going to say there's going to be one technology. I hope there isn't one technology that wins them all, because I think that's a scary situation. That means all innovation stops.
A backup.
There always needs to be a diversity of technologies to ensure things stay safe. But also, you want innovation. You want people competing and coming up with new ideas. But what I will say is probably the most important technology evolution we've had in the recent times is the smartphone. Everyone is carrying one of these devices around, at least in countries like America. Mm-hmm. And this device contains a biometric sensor. It contains a hardware key store. It contains a very nice user interface that allows you to actually interact with it. They're personal devices, so they're designed to keep your information private. There's all kinds of very interesting effects that come out of this. And that, to me, is one of the technologies that when applied properly, is really going to redefine how we think about securing credentials, how we manage people's identities, and how you deal with things like, well, do I have to carry a wallet full of cards today, or can I keep it all on my phone reasonably and safely?
Or even just a smartwatch.
Or a smartwatch. I mean,
we need the phone.
I was going to say, I love it. Every time I take the subway in New York, I just tap on my watch twice, and I can just pay. What is that technology
called? I don't use
it's NFC, near field communications, but Omni, yeah. Yeah, so Omni's...
All stations in New York City are already equipped with it, right?
I think the majority of them are, yeah. I would definitely say, I spent a lot of time on the Lexington line and on the NQRW, so they're all equipped there, and it's very convenient, I have to say. More convenient than having to fish for a Metro card, or if we think back to having to fish for tokens or something.
Right. So there could be a day when we only carry digital devices and nothing paper, like paper currency or identification. Right.
I honestly think we're close to that.
You're speeding on the road, on the highway. The police pulls you over, and he goes without. Instead of asking license and registration, what does he ask? scan this thing for me, or let me scan this for you.
I mean, that's
whatever.
Microsoft's actively working on this using, interestingly enough, a combination of blockchain
the road ahead, right?
Bill
Gates. I don't know if you read the book.
No,
the road ahead.
And so
back in the 90s. Yeah,
oh, okay. No, I actually I never read the book, but
it came with a multimedia CD. You know.
Nice.
I gotta find that.
I was gonna say that's a classic.
I gotta find that. Multimedia. CD where, see their animations and things like that. Because back in those days, you're like, wow, look at this speech recognition.
Yeah.
They showed videos about okay, in the future you can interview someone, and then the speech recognition will on the fly pick up what we're talking about, and it just writes the article for you.
I mean, it's funny how technologies like that seem so distant 10, 15 years ago. Now
Google is
exactly. It's a built-in feature. I mean, I'm sure this
Google
video
assistant,
will have automatic extraction.
That's right. Premiere now just kicked in just about a month ago.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah. Automatic speech recognition to text.
I mean, it's
we
everywhere.
can just overlay text literally as we speak.
Closed captioning, so people can read the nonsense.
So I don't need to in post-production sit there for hours on end and
got it.
Add words and sentences.
That's amazing. I mean, and that's an example of how a lot of these things have really been evolving rapidly. And for personal identity, that's going to be one of the things that I think we all thought about it, in the past, wouldn't it be convenient if I just had one identity card I had to carry, or if it was on my personal smart device. Right. And we're getting closer to that. And the work that Microsoft's been doing on...
What's the name of that technology that Microsoft...
So it's this really interesting research report, and I believe there's some proof of concept they're working on, where you can get an identity document that answers a very specific question. So let's say, for example, I want to go into a bar.
Yeah.
So if I want to go into a bar, I need to prove I'm 21. Well, I don't want to hand over my license because that contains a lot more information than my age. And other than the fact that I really don't want to reveal how old I actually am, I might want to be able to at least answer the question for the bar, am I over 21? So Microsoft can give you this proof, which might be something that is a QR code you display on your screen. And that will actually track back to some service that Microsoft runs that then contains a proof of, contains a proof of it. So the bar owner can scan and say, okay, this person's at least 21, but they don't need to know that I'm much more than 21.
Oh, I see.
So it's an interesting technology like that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The minimum you can actually,
Exactly. Yeah. So it's the minimum proof without giving over too much information.
I see, but it contains much more information.
Yeah, well, so
like Social Security or something.
I was going to say, Microsoft might know a lot more about me for this system, but in the end, the only information that they have to really reveal to the bar is Phil more than 21.
My cousin Mark, one time when first spam started appearing, in Gmail and things like that, or any other internet email relays or services, he said if each person who has some kind of a citizenship in some country, right, connects his passport as well as his address, physical address to that email address, and it's confirmed. Just like what Google does with GMB.
Yep,
Google,
the business
my business, page for whatever business, pizzeria, whatever. They send you a card to confirm, yes, that's actually someone, and then there's a code, kind of that to make that circle of security. Now, is that privacy violation? I mean, why wouldn't it work in capitalism? How come no one has ever thought about it?
I think people have tried to do this, and people have tried to create ecosystems where you have to prove who you are in order to participate in it. It just doesn't...
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but you understand, right? This will actually not allow anyone, spammers, for example, to register an email address in order to basically spam people, on their network.
Absolutely. And people have actually tried to do that. They've tried to create closed ecosystems where it's you have to and actually... An example of this recently was Parler, the social network that was they were shut down by Amazon. I think they've stood up again, but the reason I bring them up is they required that in order to participate in certain aspects of their platform, you had to prove who you are, ostensibly to ensure people were Americans.
That's right.
And that methodology, people have tried that before, and it is something that it has been kind of thrown about as a solution. In the end, Again, I think there's a privacy concern. I don't want to have to reveal that information to Google, quite frankly. I don't want to have to reveal that to my email provider. I don't want to have to give them more information than they should have about me, because
at the end of the day, it could be leaked.
Exactly. And that's what happened with Parler, right? The more information they had on individuals, the more risk that actually imposed in terms of, what happens. Like, Parler became a very interesting target because suddenly there were a lot of very famous people or politicians who had an immense amount of personal data that were on this platform in order to prove who they were. So it just becomes a matter of putting all these Easter eggs in one basket. And great if you want to get a bunch of Easter eggs, but we don't want to really abuse this metaphor. We don't want the Easter bunny to be some hacker. We want to actually protect that information and ensure that we don't have that leak out through something like that.
Right. I see. What's the last word? What would you want to say about security or computing?
I've got too many words to say one last word, but I'll say a few.
On a scale of 1 to 10, internet today, safe, not safe, in the middle, 50%, 60%?
I would say have a healthy skepticism. There's always something lurking around the corner. We have to, I think, at a certain level, function in society. So I don't want to say be paranoid about everything, because obviously that's not productive. But what I would say is, be thoughtful, consider where you're putting your personal information, consider how you protect that personal information, and really think about when you're handing over personal information, be it browsing history, your personal identity, or anything about you in the end, really. Think about how the business is actually using that data. Is that being used to sell you as a product? Is that being used?
Right. Are you a product? Or,
exactly. Right. I mean, you look at Facebook, they take your phone number so they can verify who you are, but then they also use that to target you for advertising.
And to Facebook, even if they offered some kind of paid plan, it's not, you as a user would not give them as much profit, if you will, right? If you paid for your account rather than, selling you as an identity.
Exactly.
Or whatever you set on the platform.
Selling you as a demographic, really. That's what it comes down to.
Right. It's probably like, $1,000 for an advertiser compared to, let's say, what's the maximum you would pay for Facebook? $100 a month?
Maybe that'd be pretty rich for my blood. I'd say maybe $5 a month, I think I pay like $15 a month for the service I use for cycling. So that shows you my tolerance.
Yeah, there you go.
But yeah, it
adds up as you have more
it does,
internet, accounts, if you will.
Absolutely. but I'd say, just be thoughtful about where you put your personal information, because in the end, not only is that a risk to you, but it's also, thinking about who's really profiting off of this and who is actually the product. Are you the product, or is what they're offering the product?